I think it's important to kind of clarify the other thing that slowed this all down is that we've been used to living off free energy, cheap energy,
that's right,
from oil, gas and coal. And all of those are going to peak at some point. All of those are finite resources. They'll run out at some point. And although the Earth has got vast amounts of them, we use vast amounts every day. So we are using up the family silver. And the financial incentive to bring out the things that the guys have been talking about hasn't actually been there until now. But if you notice, if any of you drive a car, you'll have noticed that petrol and diesel are well over £1 a litre now. That's a market force that's creating that price. It isn't just the government putting on tax. That price will keep going up and up and up now. And as that price goes up, the desirability or the financial advances in having solar panels on your roofs will become much more attractive. Your water heated by the sun will become much more of an intelligent thing to do. Right. So it's going to be.
I just want to progress a bit before we talked about solar. What are the other sort of energy that is available for the consumer? What are the choices out there, basically?
I mean, it's interesting, just on this particular point. It is true in Britain, for instance, that we're going to become a net importer of oil. Our North Sea oil is going to run out by around 2012. We're going to be a net importer by 2012. But there are vast reserves of gas which are currently untapped, which are in Qatar, which are in Iran, which are in Russia, which are likely to sustain ourselves for a long period of time. And I think if you take a dispassionate approach to the issue of climate change, although we all want to have renewables, the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. So you do need to have an alternative to renewable energies, and we will need to use some fossil fuels. So we do need to utilize those fossil fuels, but we just need to make them cleaner. So wind, solar, geothermal, which is heat from the ground. There's lots of heat in the ground. Obviously the core of the earth is hot and that generates heat. You can generate energy from there, is also important. And the other thing that we need to think about on a global level is not just heat, it's cooling. There are a large amount of countries in the Middle East, for instance, in Pakistan, elsewhere, that don't need heat. Actually, they need cooling. So a lot of these resources can be used to generate electricity that can actually provide us with cooling. And that's something that we also need to think about on a global level.
I mean, you talked about energy and you've mentioned some of the countries which are energy rich, you could say, in the Middle East. Something which is sort of linked to that, which I think is quite interesting. In Iran, they're talking about developing nuclear energy, which they say is for energy use, but then the security element comes into it as well. What's your view on nuclear energy?
Nuclear energy is the biggest lie in terms of carbon footprint that has ever been foisted on us, and nobody discusses this. If you consider the life of energy that's produced by a nuclear power station, you've got to start right at the beginning. You've got to start right at the beginning of creating a power station in the first place. It has to be built like Fort Knox to make it safe. That means thousands and thousands of cubic meters of concrete. Concrete is an incredibly expensive material to make in terms of carbon footprint. Okay, so that's the very first thing you've got to remember. Then you have to acquire the uranium before you can enrich it and produce it. Have you ever seen the landscape in Australia where they get this uranium? Millions of tons of rock have to be moved and shifted and broken up before you can get an ounce of uranium. Okay, so the carbon footprint there is vast. But the biggest footprint of the whole thing is in taking care of all this waste. The half-life of uranium-235 is 10,000 years. It takes 10,000 years to become half as toxic, half as viable as it was before. We've got to look after that waste. We've got to keep putting it in concrete vats. We've got to keep storing it. We've got to keep moving it, checking it. That's going to take. That's going to give you.
So if that's the case, I mean, why are people pushing nuclear energy then? Because what I seem to hear is that people say that nuclear energy doesn't rely on the weather and everything. It doesn't rely on those factors. So it's a good sort of stepping stone, so to say, until we get renewable energy going.
I disagree personally.
I think, as I said, taking a dispassionate approach, I think we need to have a mix of energy. We can't have all renewables, we can't have all fossil fuels, and we can't have nuclear. If you take France as a practical example of what's been happening for energy, more than 80% of their energy is generated through nuclear power stations. The vast majority of their power is nuclear, and they haven't so far had any difficulties. Now, I'm not an advocate of nuclear one way or the other. It's far above my pay grade to make any decisions about whether nuclear should be part of our energy mix or not. But looking at it and seeing what we've done so far, perhaps it has to be. We had our first nuclear reactor here in 1956. 9 of them at the moment in Britain are not in operation. We have a little more than 20 that are in operation, but by 2023 all but one of them are going to have to shut down. So because they're so old, so given that we have 20% of our electricity that is generated from nuclear in Britain, the question is, what is it that we're going to do in order to replace that? Are we going to replace them with new nuclear power stations, or are we going to have some other alternative? That's a debate that has to be had.
Well, I believe I'm in the view that we still need a nuclear mix, and we should invest in nuclear. There still should be a push for renewables, but the reality is the full spread rollout of renewable technologies will take a lot longer than the construction of a nuclear plant. The problem is the skills to run those nuclear plants are running out. We've not been investing in skills within universities. And as mentioned, these plants are closing. Once the last one closed, we could have a gap of, 10 years or so to construct a new plant. Where are we then? We have a shortage there. And we are reliant on oil, and we are reliant on gas from abroad. We've got a national security issue as well. We can keep importing products, oil from the Middle East, gas from Russia, but as soon as another rift in political relations,
they turn the tap off. Then
Well, exactly. So we need to be in a position where we're secure ourselves.
Can I throw a spanner into the works here? It was mentioned that nuclear covers 20% of our energy bill, and I think that's I think that's right. That figure is there or thereabouts. Instead of saying to ourselves, okay, we've got to renew that, why not invest the billions and billions, and it will be billions if we rebuild these power stations. Why not invest that in doing what Sonny's talking about, which is to make every home carbon neutral in the first place, in terms of insulation, in terms of its efficiency. You would reduce your need for that 20% and more. You would never need to build these things if we did the right thing to our buildings in the first place. And that would be the benefits of that would last forever, and we then wouldn't have to worry about getting rid of the waste.
That's an interesting point.
I think that's true, Tom, but I think that the question is that investment in trying to adapt and mitigate some of the climate change in our properties is something that will have to be made by individuals or governments. An investment in nuclear is made by the private sector. Now, the private sector makes decisions about whether it wants to invest in any sort of technology or any business based on their return on investment and return on capital. So there isn't a return on investment for some, I'm obviously not going to name names, but for some of the French companies that are involved in nuclear and have the expertise to adapt our properties, but there is potential return on investment for the investment in nuclear technologies.
That's when the environmental issue comes down to a business issue, doesn't it? At the end of the day,
either that or the government pays.
Energy companies are there to make.
No nuclear process makes a profit. We subsidise it, so it's not even financially viable. It's not even as though if you bought shares in a nuclear power station that you would be making buckets of money. You'd probably make more money from the feed-in tariff. So, big debate. It's a big debate.
The government has said, I'm beginning to sound like an advocate, I'm not actually, but just really putting the facts before us, but the government has said in its coalition agreement, the Liberal Democrats here in Britain have quite clearly said that they don't support nuclear. Well, we know their position. If you take the Tory position, they've said they do support nuclear, but they only do so on the basis that there is no subsidy. Now, in light of that, and knowing that the government didn't want to subsidise, and this is a position that was adopted by the previous government as well, one French company spent more than £12 billion purchasing British Energy in late 2008. So they've done so because they must think that there is a return on investment, and that's in knowing in full view that the government does not want to subsidise nuclear. So there must be some return for them, and we have to think about as a nation, do we want to have our lights switch on all the time? And do we want to make sure that the energy that we use is clean? Well, there are issues about nuclear and the safety of it, but at least it doesn't give off CO2.
Okay. All right.
Those safety issues, I mean, we're still talking about the problems that we've had with the plants, which have been publicised quite well. safety of nuclear power stations has increased significantly.
Indeed.
Technologies have increased as well. You know, the enrichment process and the disposal process has improved. So we've got to look at that aspect as well. You know, we, in some countries where they've invested heavily, it's a more efficient process.
So we're just going to move on slightly from here as well. We've touched a lot on nuclear as well. Coming back to the audience, I really liked an earlier point that Sunny made. He's talking about the sort of skills involved in harnessing the power of renewable energy. I mean, you guys, you're young, you're still learning, you're educating yourself. You know, when you come out of university, out of these educational institutes, you're going to be looking for jobs, and I think something all of you will agree on is that jobs in sort of these renewable energy areas will no doubt increase. Is that something that you take on board? Do you really think, you know, actually the jobs right now, whether it's oil refinery, those will be going down, and jobs in you know, solar systems and installing other types of renewable energy will increase? Do you take that into account? We've got Khalid, what would you? I mean, looking from a very personal level, one way climate change can affect is the actual outcome when it comes to employment as well.
When I was at university, it wasn't sort of what didn't come into my mind. More recently, over the last 3-4 years, when I've become more involved in the Alternative Energy Committee, which sort of provides electricity, rural electrification of Africa. We've started using more renewable energy resources such as solar energy and wind turbines. And from that, my interest in sort of renewable energy has increased, and I've sort of gained the practical knowledge of how to install these renewable energy devices in these rural locations. And I've seen what the benefits of these are. And as such, now I'm more interested in this, and I've sort of started increasing my knowledge of how to sort of put this into application here in the UK as well. So you can see the opportunities coming, but it does require a bit of effort on your own part to look into how you can increase your knowledge, how you can sort of learn how to install these things yourself.
To that point, Ibrahim, just coming to you. I mean, in your studies at the moment, are your lecturers at university actually talking about green issues? Are they trying to address it, and are they educating you about it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, whenever you're talking about engines, you look at the kind of cycles you have with it, how you analyze an engine. And once you've done that analysis, the next direct thing will be, how can you make it more efficient? If this is a power station, what things will increase the power output of it? So they are trying to inculcate that in.
And what about renewable energies as well? Is that something that you discuss?
Not specifically. I mean, I suppose it, you know, something you'd like to go into. At the moment, they're trying to get the basics in. I think, but now I'm going into my third year. That's when you can start to specialise. You can go into those fields, but once you eventually got the basics in you.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. We've had some fantastic views there from the audience.